All righty, and we are live. We are live. Just gonna wait a little bit to see who's coming through, to see when we are live on our three different sites, on Facebook, YouTube, and our other Facebook page. Alrighty, looks like we're live on Facebook. Welcome, welcome. Come on in. Come on in. We are just getting started. And we have a wonderful Tuesday talk for you this evening. We have brother Tony Browder and his daughter Atlantis. And we are live on the Shrine of Ma'at Facebook page right now. Welcome, come on in. Welcome, Sen Humphrey. He is a fully initiated member of the Shrine of Ma'at. Welcome. Welcome. Got to give a shout out to Cameron. He was here an hour before we began. I told you, people be lining up.
Good.
We've got a really great Tuesday talk heading for tonight, guys. I'm excited for this. I'm excited for everybody that we bring, because everyone has lots of great stuff to discuss and talk about spirituality and Pan-Africanism and all of those types of topics. I'm really excited that we have Atlantis here today. We are seeing the baton being passed from father to daughter. And before I was even in the Shrine of Ma'at, I had seen the book that she had written when she was a little girl. Well, she was a little girl to me at the time, because I'm a little older than her by a little bit. And so I was like, oh, that's so cute. Look at this little Black girl. Oh, I like this little book. This is so cute. I just thought it was awesome. And then I came across the picture of the two of them in Karakhamun's tomb. And at the time, I didn't know who you were. I was like, the father let his daughter go down there first. So when history is retold correctly, we know that this Black woman, this Black girl, went down there first. And I thought that was so touching that as a father, you did that for your daughter. Fast forward to the present day, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, that's the guy with the daughter with the book. So this is really wonderful that things have come full circle, and we're able to see what happens when you are deliberately raising your children and living in Ma'at and living centered as an African person. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Brother Tony Browder and Sister Atlantis to Tuesday Talk. So welcome, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to read their bios, and I'm going to read them in full, because what they've done is worth hearing every single word. So Brother Browder's bio. Brother Browder is an author, publisher, cultural historian, artist, and educational consultant. He is a graduate of Howard University's College of Fine Arts and has lectured extensively throughout the United States, Africa, the Caribbean, Mexico, Japan, and Europe on issues related to African and African American history and culture. Brother Browder is the founder and director of IKG Cultural Resources and has devoted 43 years of researching ancient Egyptian history, science, philosophy, and culture. He has traveled to Egypt 64 times since 1980 and is currently director of the Asa Restoration Project, which is funding the excavation and restoration of the 25th dynasty tomb of Karakhamun in Luxor, Egypt. Brother Browder is the first, let me say this again, y'all. I'm gonna say this slowly. Brother Browder is the first African American to fund and coordinate an archaeological dig in Egypt, and has conducted 37 archaeological missions to Egypt since 2009. Okay. Brother Browder's 4.5 decades of study have led him to the conclusion that ancient Africans were the architects of civilization and developed the rudiments of what has become the scientific, religious, and philosophical backbone of humankind. It is from this framework that IKG has concentrated its research and disseminated its findings. Through IKG, Brother Browder sponsors lectures, seminars, cultural field trips of Washington, D.C., publishes his research, and has conducted study tours to Egypt, West Africa, South Africa, and Mexico since 1987. He is the author of 6 publications, including the bestsellers From the Browder File and Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, and co-authored of 6 publications, including 2 written with his now 39-year-old daughter, Atlantis Tai. All of Brother Browder's publications are currently being used in classrooms around the world. So welcome, Brother Browder. I love reading your bio. It's really just, a culmination of excellence and dedication and devotion to knowledge and to Pan-African Black people. So welcome.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invite.
Yes. So I'm going to read his daughter's bio next, so then we can get our discussion on and popping, y'all. So we have Atlantis Tai Browder. Atlantis Tai Browder was born in Cheverly, Maryland, and resides in suburban Washington, D.C. She is a graduate of Archbishop Carroll High School in the District of Columbia and Bowie University, where she received a bachelor's degree in history. Her interests include reading, teaching youth and adults, meeting people, African and African American history, spiritual development, and nutrition. Atlantis also enjoys traveling. She has been to 25 states throughout the United States and has visited over 15 countries. Atlantis is the co-author of 3 books: My First Trip to Africa, which was published in 1981 when she was 8, Africa on My Mind, which was published in 1995, and Reflections on My First Trip to Africa, published in 2020. All of her books are currently used in classrooms in the US and around the world. Between 2001 and 2019, Atlantis worked with the Children's Defense Fund's Freedom School program and has trained thousands of elementary, high school, and college students around the country in the areas of reading enrichment, curriculum delivery, team building, leadership development, and social action. She also worked as a servant leader and administrator for summer and after-school programs, serving hundreds of youth in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Mississippi, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. Atlantis worked as education in the District of Columbia from 2007 to 2017, teaching middle and high school students. She now currently serves as the National Director for IKG's Cultural Imperative Initiative, which allows her to reach a larger number of youth across the United States. Atlantis is the vice president of the IKG Cultural Center in Washington, D.C., and has spent every summer since 2010 working with her father, excavating and restoring the 25th dynasty tomb of Karakhamun on the west bank of Luxor, Egypt. This historical work is being done under the auspices of the Asa Restoration Project, which is the first Egyptian excavation funded by African Americans. Atlantis Browder is a woman of many firsts. She was the youngest published author in the USA, the first African American to enter the 2,700-year-old burial chamber of Karakhamun, and Atlantis Browder and Anthony Browder are the first father-daughter archaeological team in history. Atlantis is dedicated to educating herself and uplifting of her people. Yes, welcome. Tell me that wasn't dope. We need applause, sound effects, because I get so excited just to read those things and to understand who we have here. So let's get started with this question. Can you explain, Brother Browder, the IKG Restoration Center?
Okay, IKG Cultural Resource Center.
Yes, sorry.
IKG was started 40 years ago on February 3rd. And it was a direct result of my having first traveled to Egypt with Dr. Ben in 1980 and returning to Washington and feeling a need to share what I had learned with my community. So it was through the creation of IKG that I began doing lectures in Washington, and that ultimately led to my writing books, doing study tours, and all the work that we're doing now. So it was designed specifically to help re-educate people of African ancestry primarily.
Oh, okay. Oh, cool. And what does IKG stand for?
IKG, well, when it was first started 40 years ago, IKG was the Institute of Karmic Guidance, because in my development, I was fortunate to have learned early in my life of the importance of karma, cause and effect, and how that regulates everything that affects every aspect of our lives. And I thought that by us knowing about our African history and allowing the knowledge of the past to project how we create a world into through the present and into the future, then this idea of karmic guidance, we get what we create. So creating things that are life sustaining will help us to become a much more productive people. Over the years, as I developed other businesses related to IKG, I found that there were some folk in our community who had a little reluctance towards embracing the idea of karma. They thought it was pagan. They thought it was, anti-religious. So in order to cut back on the resistance to what I was teaching, I decided to rebrand it as IKG. And so when people ask me what IKG stands for, depending on their attitude or their consciousness or how I read them, I may say, well, IKG stands for information, knowledge, and growth. We provide you information, which, when used properly, becomes part of your knowledge base. And then through the application of that knowledge, it allows you to grow. So that satisfies the curiosity of most folk. And for those who are ready to dive a little bit deeper, I'll talk about the original name of the company.
Okay, great. That would make sense. I could see how some people unfortunately, might be a little afraid of the word karma.
And well, it is what it is. And it's a matter of using whatever means necessary. Malcolm said that, right? Using whatever means necessary to free people's minds.
That's true. Meeting people where they are.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely important. So Atlantis, what's it like to have Anthony Browder as a father, and what led up to you writing your first book at 8?
Well, what is it like?
Having a historian as a father. Let me be more clear, because I ain't trying to get in y'all personal business.
No. I understand your question. I mean, I don't know what it's like to not be without him. So this is all that I've ever known. And at a very early age, my dad, I don't want to say immersed me, but subtle immersion, introducing me to this information by taking me with them to different presentations and workshops and conferences, and then officially making my first trip to Egypt in 1989 when I was 7 years old. I consider that to be the beginning of what I refer to as my metamorphosis. And metamorphosis is the transformation that takes place as a result of someone having traveled to Kemet and learning about the origins of who we were as the originators of culture, of humanity. And so I had no idea that trip in 89 would lead me to where I am now, but it's definitely been a journey that I've enjoyed and wouldn't trade for anything.
Okay, great. So did you write your book, your first book, right before you went, or was it when you just gotten back?
So actually, after we returned from my first trip to Egypt, a good friend of ours suggested the idea that I write a book and call it My First Trip to Africa. So at that time, and because my father was a single parent, I had always wanted to be just like my dad. So several months before my first trip, he had published his first book, From the Browder File. And so with that idea to write my own book, it was a perfect opportunity to follow in the footsteps of my dad and work towards becoming just like him, being a writer, a lecturer, and educator. So I was excited about the idea. We ended up making it like a extended homework assignment. So every day when I would come home from school, I would get on the computer, work on the narrative and collect the pictures and defining words that would go in the glossary. And believe it or not, after 30 months, we finished
30 days, 30 days, not 30 months.
30 months. 30 days. Thank you, Dad. After 30 days, we completed that book project and published it in 91. And since then, I've been very fortunate to continue to work with my dad and travel all around the country teaching both youth and adults about our history before slavery.
Right. our whole entire existence before slavery. Yeah. So how old were you when you went on your first excavation, and when you uh, traveled there? What was that like to be like, wow, I'm about to go over to Egypt or over to Kemet, which whatever word was you were using, and be a part of history and restoring something that we as Black people in the world need to know?
Mhm. So I think I was about 25 or 26 around the time that my dad uh, started the Asa Restoration Project. And I have to be honest, I tell people when he got started, I thought he was crazy. Um, being involved in excavation was something that was new to both of us. And of course, I had no experience with archaeological work. So what was very interesting though was to see my dad get so excited about having Medellin, and I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about that later on. But when I had the opportunity to actually go to Egypt and meet Dr. Elena Pishakova and her daughter, who are working at the site during the summer months. When I had an opportunity to meet them and visit the site, I was blown away. And I could not have predicted, 30 something years ago that we would be involved in this work. So it was an amazing experience. And that within the first week that we were there, we had time to uh, excavate Karakhamun's burial chamber. So that picture, that famous picture that people often see of us inside of the burial chamber, my dad and I had an opportunity to spend a week excavating, having serious daddy-daughter time. But it was then that I realized that this is something. And just to see how the project has grown over the years. In the beginning, we weren't getting as much as the support that we would have liked to. But because of the progress that we've made and people have invested in us, they've believed in us. And that's why we are here today. So it's been an amazing experience, but more so just to see. And hopefully, since you'll be able to come to Egypt one of these days and visit our excavation site, with people who were there 10 years ago or 13 years ago and who come back and see it now, their minds are completely blown away at the progress that we've made restoring this temple tomb.
Awesome. That's great. So you're like, Dad, you're crazy. What you doing? It's hot. And then you're like, wow, this is awesome. Look at how magnificent it is. I went to Egypt to Kemet with Anika and Jabari. It was the year before I was initiated into the Shrine of Ma'at. My dad had just died in 2016. And I went to Egypt, and we were going to go to your father's site, and I don't remember what happened, but we couldn't go. I was like, dang. That was one of the reasons that I wanted to go, because I wanted to see the site. I wanted to see the excavation. I wanted to see what that is all about, what that entails, and also to see some Black people doing it and handling our own history, our own actual artifacts. That was pretty dope. So I definitely want to go back and go to the site to see, what's going on and actually be a part of watching history unfold. Definitely, absolutely. So, brother Browder, how did you get started? Like, how did this Howard graduate, who's historian and a lecturer, say, I think I'm going to start excavating?
Well, if you look at the trajectory of my life, I almost feel like the Black Forrest Gump. I kind of stumble into things just fall into my lap, and I feel that is very much karmic. I put certain information out there, and opportunities reveal themselves to me. My major at Howard University was graphic design and advertising. So I'm not trained as a writer. I'm not trained as a researcher. I'm not trained as an Egyptologist. I'm not trained as an archaeologist, but I've made my living doing all of these things over the past 40 years, 30, 40 years. So it's simply a matter of me being in the right place at the right time and prepared for whatever awaits me. So I have been doing study tours to Egypt since 1987. And my dear friend, my dear brother, Abanaga Gabriel, who was my guide in Egypt for 21 years, was very much like a brother to me. We had a wonderful relationship. And he had been telling me for the longest time that I needed to come to Egypt early before our group so that he could take me on this tour that he designed to the Western Desert. It's at a place where, no Black Americans have ever been there. And I kept putting him off. And then in July of 1980, I said, all right, I'll come over early. We'll do the tour, Western Desert, and then I can chill a couple of days in Luxor, and then we'll go to Cairo, pick up the group, and do our study tour. That was the game plan. So that tour into the Western Desert was one of the most spiritually transformative experiences I've ever had in my life. We're in the middle of nowhere. The three of us, we have a driver in a 4-wheel drive vehicle, satellite phone, camping gear, and we just go out into the desert and hit it. I found petrified wood in the middle of the desert. I found shark's teeth in the middle of a desert. I found the carcass of a dead whale in the middle of a desert, which just opened my eyes to what this space was hundreds of thousands of years ago. And then sleeping under the nighttime sky and looking up and literally seeing a blanket of stars in the sky. As far as the eye can see, there were these white lights amid all of this blackness. And down on me, I'm seeing the same sky, the same constellations that our ancestors saw thousands of years ago. So just the enormity of the moment just fell upon me. After we finished that tour, I came to Luxor. I stayed at his apartment for a couple of days. And then he sent his nephew over to see me one evening. His nephew was working with Alina Pistakova, who had just recently, 2 years prior, discovered these lost tombs of South Ossetia, these lost tombs of 3 Kushite noble persons. And my friend Abu Naga thought that I would be interested in this information. Now, prior to that time, I had no real awareness or appreciation of the 25th dynasty. It really didn't register with me that much. But I spoke with Alina over the phone, made arrangements to go over and visit her the following day. And I went to the site. She was 2 years into the excavation and had run out of money. She was, because of obstacles that she had faced, trying to get funding, she literally funded this project with her own money. She had already invested $80,000 over the course of 2 years funding this project, and she had run out of money. And as I saw what she had begun, I could hear Dr. Clark in one ear. I could hear Asa in the other ear saying, Tony, you've got to move on this. You've got to move on this. So I told Alina, well, look, I know a few people and people know me, and I think I can raise the money. So don't worry about it. The project will move forward. So she had organized it as the South Ossetia Conservation Project. It's an American-Egyptian mission. And since I was going to come on board and raise funds for the continuation of this work, I knew I had to come up with a name that really expressed what I felt our work was going to entail. And we're at a site on the west bank of Luxor, known as South Ossetia. The mountain range is the Asasif Mountains, Asasif. My dear friend, my dear brother, Asa Hilliard had just died in Egypt a year earlier, and I'm still missing him. I'm still mourning his loss. Yeah. And I'm thinking about, what I want to do. And I said, wait a minute, Asasif, Asa, the Asa Restoration Project. So I kind of conceived the whole idea while I was there in Egypt that July. And when I came back to the States, I called Asa's wife, Patsy, and shared with her my idea, flew down to Atlanta, met her and her son, Hakeem, laid out the idea, received their blessings. And so on September the 21st, 2008, the Asa Restoration Project was born. So we have been funding the project for the past 13 years. And we represent the first time in the history of ancient Egypt, history of modern Egypt, that African Americans have been involved in funding and fully participating in an archaeological excavation in Egypt. And just to fast forward to the present moment in terms of what we've done, we started off 13 years ago excavating and restoring 3 25th Dynasty tombs. As of November of last year, we now have 20 tombs. We found 15 tombs last season, and we suspect that there's probably another 20 feet or so underfoot waiting to be discovered. Our restoration work has been lauded by the Egyptian government, the ministry department, and we were told that we have the best restoration work of any foreign mission in Egypt. So we are now the gold standard with which every other foreign mission in Egypt will measure the quality of their work. So this is what the ASA Restoration Project has produced within 13 years. And we're moving towards the grand opening of the site in the fall of 2025. And that's when all the pieces are going to come together, and we'll be able to showcase to the world what we've done.
Wow. I've never heard that. That's amazing. Not that you're the gold standard, because I totally expect that, but the whole story of how the baton was passed to you with the ancestors letting you know that this is something that you have to take on. When the first time that you did that, like kind of by yourself or whatever, did you feel a little overwhelmed, or like, what, am I gonna break something? Like, how deep do you dig, and how do you wipe off stuff? Like, what were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts were, how am I going to pay for this? I mean, let's get real.
Right.
Because at the time, it was costing us $10,000 a month for the 4 months we were there, $40,000 a year. And, we set up the ASA Restoration Project as a 501c3. I mean, it was so easy. I set it up to make it so easy for folk to come on board and be a part of this. And the funds weren't coming in. And so we've got payroll every Thursday. So whenever we didn't have the money in the bank to make payroll, I took out my ATM card and pulled out $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 to make payroll, to buy supplies, to buy equipment. And so that was taxing. That was the most taxing part of this work. But the reality is now, our budget has increased from $40,000 a year to now we for the last 3 years, our budget has averaged about $100,000 a year. We have expanded our work. We have new tombs that we're working on. We have approximately 125 people working for us. And we've done 3 museum exhibitions at the Luxor Museum. So all of that costs money. And, we've been blessed to have garnered increasing support over the years, which has made everybody's life much easier. And the mere fact that we've done this, we're the first Black folk in history who have done this. And of course, we've always had our naysayers, but we have plowed through. And what I've learned is that people like winners. And the ASA Restoration Project has been winning. Every single year, we make a discovery that eclipses the discovery that we made in the prior year. So folk see this, and every year, every September, I do a report to the community on the ASA Restoration Project. And people have been excited about what we have done. And that has made it possible for us to do the work that has brought us to this point, and the work that will get us to 2025 and beyond. So what is beautiful for me is to be, two things really have affected me on a personal level. And it wasn't until, I guess, last year, after we found the name of the original inhabitant of one of the tombs that we had excavated. All of these tombs have been used and abused by Kemites, by the Greeks, by the Romans, by the Arabs. They've been exploited. And so we found the name of the original occupant of one of the tombs that had been co-opted by a person of the 26th dynasty.
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're able to call that tomb by its original name, call that owner by his original name, Nespanedjet. And it dawned on me, working in this site, working in the largest necropolis in the world, that these tombs were built to honor those ancestors there. And part of honoring those ancestors is to be able to say their name, to give them life, to bring them libations, to make offerings so that they can live. And they in turn will feed you for having fed them. And we have experienced that on so many different levels. So it hit me that, we are, we are connected with ancestors who are 2,700 years old. And they are protecting us, they are guiding us, they are inspiring us, and they are pleased with the work that we've done. So to know that we are giving life to these ancestors is the best benefit that I could have ever received from doing this work. And it's opened doors of opportunity for us and others who have been a part of this work. And that's really the point that I want folk to get from this. It's not so much a matter of us digging a tomb or just the restoration work of the tomb. It's the fact that we are restoring the sacred spaces of these ancestors.
That's right.
We're renewing our connection with these ancestors. And if anyone truly understands what this is all about, the ancestors live for us. They work through us. And when we commit ourselves to restoring their sacred spaces, to speaking their names, then they now have vessels that they can work through in order to help you accomplish whatever you desire. That's how the process works. And we've been able to be the beneficiaries. We've been able to confirm that reality, and it just makes everything else so much easier.
Did y'all hear that? They become the vessels when you speak the ancestor's name, and they are restoring our sacred spaces for our ancestors, And in the process, it is correcting history. It's filling in glaring, gaping holes that have been created on purpose. It's debunking lies and putting exaggerations back into its proper scope. So this work is literally revealing history and literally revealing heritage, and in the process, creating sacred spaces for our ancestors. So when you are, if you want to share with this next part, when you are approaching the space, doing the dig, do you have any kind of spiritual ritual that you do? And if you do, would you share some of it with us?
We do certain things to connect with our ancestors, and I'll tell you about it offline.
Oh, awesome. Definitely. Yes. Can Atlantis, can you tell us a little bit about your spiritual practice and how it was introduced to you? And let me give you a little anecdote about me. With my parents gave me all the Black they had to give me, which was Jesus was Black, the first people on the planet were African people, and Santa Claus ain't real. Now, there were other things, those three things, and I was never read fairy tales. So I didn't have this obsession with the white Jesus savior complex, white man savior complex, or me be white and have blonde hair and all that good stuff. I ain't had none of that. So what kind of foundation did you get from your parents? And how do you think that informs your spirituality or informs like who you are like as a child coming up?
That's a great question. And before I answer that, Dad, I know that there is a response that you could give in terms of things that we do that we feel comfortable sharing online. And I would have to say the first and most important thing is the awareness, knowing that we are going into these sacred spaces. So carrying that awareness into the sites and one of the things that is kind of connected to the question that you asked in terms of spirituality is the importance of symbolism. And so I remember my dad teaching me about what's known as the Haru Badet. It's the sun disk with wings. And I remember when he told me or first discovered that, was it in um, uh, the name of the book is escaping me right now. But
Oh,
anyway,
Stolen Legacy. The
yes,
Stolen
thank you.
Legacy.
Stolen Legacy by George G.M. James. And so that's when he realized, oh, so George G.M. James basically mentioned that know thyself can be found throughout all of the, or many of the sites or temples in Kemet. And so I remember when my dad realized that know thyself was presented in the form of the Haru Badet. And so I was amazed once I learned that, and I started paying attention when I went to went on the trips to Egypt during the summer, that every temple, at the entrance of every temple, and even within the temple, they had this huge Haru Bidet, and it signified or reminded the visitor that before they enter that space, or when they enter that space, they should conduct themselves in a certain manner. And so, even when we are at our excavation site during the summer, we maintain a certain level of a respect that we exhibit through our behavior and through our interactions on the site. So I think that's a fair response to that. But to get back to your question, um, it's kind of interesting because growing up, as my dad mentioned, or I think was said earlier, that he was a single parent. So he was the primary parent figure in my life, but his mom, my grandmother, was also a very important person in my life. In fact, she was the primary female figure in my life. And so she was a Baptist. She went to church every Sunday and she took me to church every Sunday. I was in the choir, I was in Girl Scouts. And so as I got older, as I'm able to comprehend a little bit better the information that my father is writing about and doing presentations about, I'm beginning to make connections where my mind is firing. And I start to realize that what I was learning in the church or in Sunday school, it conflicted with the information that my father was teaching me. And so he was able to, in a very simple way, help me to understand why I was experiencing this conflict. And so when I realized that um, many of the world's major religions evolved from Kemetic spirituality or spiritual practices, it all made sense. But I couldn't understand why our people preferred to
Girl.
practice modern religions as opposed to go back to the source. And so I can remember I was probably about maybe 13 or 14, and I didn't want to go to church anymore. I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't getting the spirit. And so I remember giving my grandmother a hard time about waking up to go to church. And then she would go to my dad and I was, Dad, can you help me out? Like, I need you to support me. And he supported me by letting my grandmother know that if I did not want to go to church, I didn't have to go to church. And so during my teenage years, I actually stopped going to church. But what I did eventually do as I got older was realize that I can create my own sacred space. It could be within my home or other places, and so I didn't necessarily have to go to church to communicate with the Creator or to learn about spiritual practices or spiritual information. Um, so I can definitely appreciate the seeds that my dad planted early on in terms of understanding the spirit. So when people ask me what my religion is, I don't say that I practice a specific organized religion, but I would refer to myself as a spiritualist. I believe in spirit. I believe in a higher power. And I do believe that we all, as spiritual beings having a human experience, that we have the ability to connect with this higher spirit, a higher power that we call God or creator or whatever term people use. But by having this information early in life, I think it really helped me to kind of skip over a lot of the conflicts that most people have, particularly in their adult years when they're, coming to grasp with the reality that Christianity or even other religions aren't what we have been taught that they are, or at least the origin of it, or the connection to African history and culture.
Right. And we didn't have fairy tales either.
Oh
You want to
yeah.
tell about
So
the two
yeah,
together?
so one of the things, so it was interesting. So my grandmother obviously celebrated Christmas, right? So I would, I love what kid doesn't love getting Christmas presents? But at the same time, my father found very creative ways of incorporating African history and culture. So I remember when I was younger, instead of receiving money from the tooth fairy, I would receive money from the tooth netcher. So my father would take
Good.
these, American or modern concepts and and give them history.
Africanize them, right?
Thank you,
Africanize.
Africanize them. Yes. So that
So,
that was one of many things, and actually, I'll just share one other thing.
uh-huh.
Um, like most children, they like to celebrate Halloween, go out and trick or treat and get some candy, which we already know was not good for them. But what my dad was not going to allow me to do was to dress up as Freddy Krueger or back in that day, Kermit the Frog, or um, uh, some other figure. But my father encouraged me to embrace African history and culture at an early age. And so I remember one of the first costumes that he made for me, I think I was about 5 or 6, but it was a costume representing Newt, the comedic
Mm,
actor Newt. And so it got me a little black leotard and painted circles on the front of it representing the sun, and painted stars along the side. And I had a little pocketbook with my name tag that said Newt. And I remember he said, "Baby, you make sure that when you go to this Halloween party at school that they don't call you Nut. Your name is Newt, and you are an African goddess." So there were so many different things that my dad did, and he was very creative in terms of infusing history and culture into our everyday life.
hmm. So, did you think Santa Claus was real? Did you know Santa Claus wasn't real?
Oh, I knew Santa Claus was not real, and my father made it very clear. I'm not going to give credit. If I'm
See,
sending money to give you kids,
I know that's right.
I'm not going to give credit to someone else. So I knew early on that my grandmother and my dad, they were quote unquote Santa Claus.
So I didn't believe in Santa Claus either. So from that, I knew the tooth fairy wasn't real either. I mean, I used to like that little quarter I got, but I knew it was my mama. So did you think that the tooth fairy and the Easter bunny was real too? I knew all of them was a lie.
I mean, to be honest with you, I was getting money, so it probably it really didn't matter. But as I got older, and even with the simple things like we
Mhm.
celebrate Easter, and during Easter, especially at church, we would have the Easter egg hunt. And I remember at some point when I realized that bunnies, rabbits don't even lay eggs, and I'm like, wait, what is going on? And so
Right.
the older you get, and as if you maintain a certain level of curiosity, you learn little pieces of information that kind of fill in the gaps, and just help you to make sense. But ultimately, um, I appreciate the fact that my father was honest. He didn't have to tell me lies,
Right.
or have me celebrate in certain things just to get me to behave well. He taught me morals. He taught me values. He gave me the foundation that I needed to live a good life. And so it was up to me to do the right thing. But he was always there to hold me accountable, and make sure I understood what was going on.
That's dope. That's dope. That yeah. I my great grandmother and one of her friends with the cards, they would take little brown crayons and just color everybody black. So we had those similar upbringings. So yeah, thank you. I was just curious to see like how other people who clearly have parents who are truthful with their kids from the beginning, what they were told and how they kind of mitigated everything. Christmas to me was visiting my family in Virginia because I already knew Santa Claus wasn't real. I knew my mom and dad paid for everything. Why wouldn't they pay for this? So it was never this big thing for me. And you could always get the gifts and toys at Toys R Us. I never really got the whole like, why are you just excited about it? And same thing with Halloween. You can go get this. It's the same candy from CVS. Like I was very practical about things, and Halloween to me was kicking it with my girls. It was like what you do when you grown, but you're doing it at 8. You hanging out, dressing up. Anyway, thank you for letting us know that. I was kind of curious about that going into the interview, hearing what your upbringing was like. So, brother Tony, can you explain what made you? When do you have time, and what drives you to say, I'm going to take some time away from my excavations to write books, because you've got the Nile Valley civilizations, you've got Finding Karakhamun, the books on the tours you give in DC. So when does the writer come out in you?
Well, the writer has been on hold for over a decade because and actually, to be honest with you, I thought, and this just goes to show you how naive I was when I first jumped into the excavation project. I thought I'd be in and out in 5 years, and I'd move on doing some other things. And now, 13 years later, or we're in our 14th year now, I realize I could be doing this for the rest of my life. And so what I'm looking at now is preparing for the next phase of my life. I've got a couple of businesses set up. I've got young folk that I've worked with for a decade or more. And now it's about passing the baton on to them so that I can move on and get back to doing the things that allow me to do what I'm doing now. So I'm preparing Atlantis to start doing the study tours and to take over the lead with the excavation. I've got a team of folk who are handling our Egypt on the Potomac. I've got another person who's doing our Wisdom Wednesdays. So I'm looking at getting back to writing. I've got about 3 books up here that I need to get out, and doing some other traveling. There's some other places I want to go, things that I want to see. There's some other truths that are waiting to be discovered. So I'm looking forward to the 3rd act in the Tony Browder story. And I'll be writing about it. I'll be sharing the information. So stay tuned.
Good. One of the questions that I wanted to ask, is there a way, or have you thought about some kind of school or some kind of educational component that teaches people how to do the excavation so that Atlantis can have a team of like 10 people and then you rotate them out and bring in the next set or something along those lines?
That is the next phase of the Ace of Restoration project.
Okay.
What I envision is doing 2 things. Taking the historical information that we have unearthed over the past 15 years now in total, and incorporating that information in publications, curricula, so that this information can be infused into educational systems all around the world. Everybody learns about Egypt, but very few people learn that Egypt is African, that Egypt is in Africa, and that the ancient Kemites were in fact Africans. Very few people know anything of substance about the 25th dynasty. We're still being taught that the 25th dynasty is the Negro dynasty. So we've got the goods now to explode all of those myths and teach a new generation a new interpretation of this history. The other phase of the Ace of Restoration project is to begin to train our replacements. We are working with top-notch Egyptologists from all over the world, architects and engineers and pottery experts and bone experts. And what I would love to be able to do is to create a space where we can go to appeal to HBCUs primarily and recruit architectural students, engineering students, and then do internships so that they can come to our site and get some practical experience so they can become the leader in doing this work in Egypt. So, I mean, that's how everybody else who was there, that's how they got started. So part of our goal of collecting funds, doing the grand opening, is to create an endowment. And I envision an endowment of $4 or $5 million. And we can use the interest from that endowment to underwrite internships, to underwrite other things that will fund the project in perpetuity, so that we don't have to spend a great deal of time worrying about fundraising. This project is at a point now where it's ready to take on a life of its own, and we can shape the next 2-3 generations of archaeologists, Egyptologists, artists, designers, engineers who can come to the place where all of those skills began, and allowed themselves to become instruments of the ancestors who are just waiting for black bodies to work through.
Right.
So I mean, that's the process, and I see that as my karmic destiny. Because I'm doing things that I have no formal training in the things that I've been doing all these decades, but I'm doing them, and I'm doing them better than folk who have been trained. So I've accepted the fact that this is what I'm supposed to do, and I am intentional about opening doors and creating opportunities for other souls to come through behind me, so that we change the narrative. Again, karmic guidance, everything is cause and effect. So when you create the causes that will produce the effects that will be beneficial to yourself and to your people, you change history. So that's the intent behind everything that I've done with IKG over the past 40 years. And so the ASA Restoration Project has allowed me to now elevate my game and open up a larger pipeline for more people. So what I'm looking for at this point in my life, at this point in my career, I'm looking for serious people, people who are willing to commit themselves to something greater than themselves, not just people who want to come to Egypt and put their hands in the sand and touch the sand of the ancestors, because that stuff wears off after a while, because it's 115, 118 degrees in Egypt. It's hot. You're dirty. So you have to have a different mentality. You have to have a different motivation. And so it's about finding those people, cultivating that interest, and preparing those people to continue this work. And that's how this thing will play itself out.
Thank you. That was very informative. And I'm glad that you mentioned the people who really kind of look at Egypt as like a bucket list location. And you put your hand in the sand and all that stuff. No, I went to Kemet, and I was appreciative that I was on the motherland, but you can't just be like, oh, I did, just like what you said, you put your hand in the sand and that's it. People have to see the bigger picture in terms of what it is that you're doing, in terms of correcting these straight up fabricated lies about who we are, who everybody else is, and what Kemet actually was, and the contributions that Kemet gave, to civilization. So with this next phase that you have with the ASA Restoration Project, how close are you to establishing this endowment or establishing internships and connecting with some of these different HBCUs?
Well, it's happening now.
Okay.
And I guarantee you that by 2025, we'll have systems in place where by the time I step back and Atlantis steps in, she'll have the resources. We'll have a system in place to begin training the next generation of archaeologists and Egyptologists. Because one of the saddest things that I've experienced with most of our organizations, when the leader dies, the organization dies.
Right.
And that's because they failed to plan adequately. My feeling has always been this information is bigger than Tony Browder. And so how do you ensure that the process continues after the major players are gone? So I'm so thrilled to be able to pass the baton to Atlantis. And she is, as I've been telling Atlantis for maybe the past 5-6 years ago, Atlantis is smarter than I am. But she doesn't want to accept that, and I get it. She's humble like her dad is, But the thing is, I'm 70 years old. Atlantis will be 40 this year, so she's a younger version. Her mind functions better than mine. I'm wiser than she is. I had more experience, so I know how to do things that she doesn't do. But when I was 30 years old, I wasn't doing what she's doing. When I was 35, I wasn't doing what she's doing. So she already has the experiences within her that will allow her to exceed anything that I've done. So I already know, I already have a clear idea of what her path forward is going to look like. And it's about doing the work, but it's also important to model for others what is possible. And that is happening as well.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know. So can you talk about who is Karakhamun, and what have you learned about Karakhamun finding his space?
Well, essentially, Karakhamun was the fourth priest of Amun at Ipet Karnak Temple. He was the person responsible for doing the morning libations within the Holy of Holies of Karnak Temple, the room that Tutmosis III referred to as the ancestors' room. This is the place where the spirit of Amen, the unseen presence of God Almighty, resided within the largest temple complex in the world, a temple complex that accommodated 83,000 people. And this man, Karakhamun, was responsible for saying the words to evoke the presence of the unseen presence of God Almighty into the Holy of Holies, so that his essence could literally inspire the 82,000 men and women who worked in his temple tomb. So that was Karakhamun. His tomb is an impressive. It's not just a tomb, it is a temple tomb. We discovered about 5 years ago, as we were clearing the superstructure, we found the presence of pylons. Pylons are built for tombs. So this space, these three major tombs at this site, Karakhamun, Karabashkin, and Nezbanejed, were built 2,700 years ago as temple tombs. They were places where these men, who were also priests of Amen at Karnak Temple, were buried, but they were also temples where the other members of their order could come and literally perform rituals, engage in activities where they could literally go to the spirit door, the western wall in each of those tombs, and petition those ancestors to come back and provide them with information that would allow them to do whatever needed to be done. So the closest parallel I can give you for that is Black Panther. When T'Challa becomes the Black Panther, he drinks the heart-shaped herb, and then he goes into the ancestral realm to commune with his dad. This is not fantasy, folk. What you see, what I have seen with my own eyes at these places on the West Bank, this is real. These folk knew that it was real. They inscribed the libations, the processes for reaching through that portal into the ancestor realm and drawing those ancestors unto them. This is real. And we've done it longer than anybody else on the planet. And the means by which we can do that right now are still available to us. So this is what is unfolding in real time. And it's key for us, because we're standing at a precipice in American history, where this country has failed to live up to its basic obligations. And we may literally be standing on the verge of a second civil war. That's real. So what do people of African ancestry living in America do when all this happens? We need to know that there are other ways that we can manipulate ourselves, find a way through this madness. We don't have to get caught up in the madness. We have options. And so it's simply a matter of caring to know enough about your history, your culture, your ancestry, so that you can then reach out to those ancestors who protected us when we were in the most dire situations that you can ever imagine. We survived the Middle Passage. We survived enslavement. We survived the auction block. We survived the lynchings. Why? Because there were forces working through us to protect us, to prepare us for specific points in time in history. And those points in time are right now. They're right now. So we have an obligation and responsibility to all of those ancestors whom we carry in our bodies by way of our DNA. And once we embrace who we are and have the courage to step outside of the psychological, economic, and spiritual forces that would hold us back, so that we would be comfortable in the matrix, that we would be comfortable being Negroes, as opposed to having the courage to be our authentic selves. One of my essays in the Browder file was entitled Becoming a Born Again African. And that's what the metamorphosis is all about. Understanding the power of Kemet, the legacy of Kemet, and then allowing that understanding to transform your consciousness so that you then could be a vessel for the ancestors to work through so that they can complete their great and mighty walk through your works. That's how the process works. So it's a matter of getting a critical mass of people to understand this and commit themselves to that process. It's not going to be everybody. It doesn't need to be everybody.
That's right.
It just needs to be a dedicated group of people who understand what this life is all about. And this life is not just about this life, it's about the life after life, and the one after that, and the one after that, and committing yourself to creating the world that you will ultimately come back and inhabit as your ancestor, right? So it's a consciousness that frees your mind from the madness that appears to be consuming most of the people in this country at this moment, and allows you to clearly negotiate spaces that will allow you to create new spaces for those ancestors who have not been born yet to work through, right? That's the process. That is what's happening in real time.
One of the benefits of being in the chat is you get to absorb everything that you just said as the speaker and just marinate with it. Hosting it, I have to respond and move on. What I really want to do is just sit in what you just said. And I'm going to say to the people who have been, following Tuesday Talk, but this is the second year of Tuesday Talk, what one of the purposes of Tuesday Talk, or goals this year, is to learn something that is practical and tangible that you can take away with when the Tuesday Talk is over. Being dedicated to knowing who you are, being dedicated to knowing who you are, as opposed to dedicated to ignorance. I was listening to someone say that the other day, and it's true. There are some people who are dedicated to ignorance. I don't want to learn this. I don't want to learn that. I ain't seeing this. I ain't hearing that. I'm just going to live in my little bubble of whatever that bubble is, because your girl does not live in it. But they're dedicated to ignorance. We need people who are dedicated to learning themselves, relearning themselves, just like what Brother Tony said, being a born-again African, so that we can reach that critical mass to make the change that we need, because those points in time are right now. So those of you who are following and who are listening, what are you going to do to be dedicated to making yourself be a part of that force so that we can get that critical mass? That's your homework. I give them homework on Tuesday Talk. That's your homework. Okay. And Brother Browder has written a few books. We're gonna talk about some of those books. Reading them, I've read some of his books. It's informative, easy reading. And I hesitate to use the word easy, because that doesn't mean it's simple. That doesn't mean it's unimportant. It means it's easily accessible. The language and structure and method that he writes is you can easily access the information. It makes sense, and it's something that that we all need to be doing, so that we can be dedicated to being a part of that critical mass. We need to open spaces to bring our ancestors back, to continue to do the work, just like what Brother Browder was saying. Okay, so I want to switch to some of the books that you've written. We talked about Finding Karakhamun, or actually Karakhamun himself. And what I'm going to do is share my screen, and I have the IKG Cultural Resource Center up. Oh my goodness, I'm not really good at this part. Wait a minute, no. How do I share the screen? Oh, it's down, wait. Here it is, it's right here. All right, share screen. It's a tab. Here we go. For some reason, I get nervous when I share the screen, y'all. Okay, so this is his site, okay? This is the site. We're gonna put, actually what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put this in the chat. All right, boom, it's in the chat. So I'm gonna go back to here. And if you go to, this is what it looks like. Just kind of scrolling down the front page of it. If you've never been to his site, it's beautiful. This is one of those websites that you can just say, oh, I'm just going to check it out. And then you're on it for like 3 hours. If we look at the books, okay. And we can see some of the books that were mentioned earlier today. Can you give us a brief synopsis of what these different books mean? Like what's in the books? I'm gonna put it to full screen. We can get a. Are you guys seeing this full screen?
Yeah, the 3 books full screen. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
So, From the Browder File was my very first book, published February 1st, 1989. It was a compilation of articles that I had written for the Washington African American newspaper. I took 22 of those articles and published my first book. I asked my dear friend, my brother Asa Hilliard, to write the introduction for the book. That book has been a perennial bestseller from day one. If you go to a bookstore, a Black bookstore, and ask the owner of the bookstore, anyone who works in the bookstore, what's a good book to read about African history and culture, they'll give you From the Browder File. Short, easy to read essays with additional information at the end of each essay for additional material that you may be interested to pursue a specific subject matter a bit deeper. From the Browder File, Volume 2, Survival Strategies for Africans in America, 13 Steps to Freedom, was the follow-up to the Browder File, in that I lived my life by seeking information and then applying the information in my life. Applied knowledge is really what this whole thing is about, because many people live their lives just doing something and not knowing why they're doing it. So Survival Strategy lays out 13 things that you can do that help you to free your mind, your body, and your soul. It's a prescription, if you will, for becoming a born-again African. The book on the extreme right is a study guide for my second book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. That was published. Nile Valley Contributions was published in 1992. It's 30 years old this coming December. One of the proudest moments of my life was when I read the introduction that John Henry Clark had written for Nile Valley. So the book had been out for a year. I ran into Dr. Clark at a conference, and every time he saw me, he always inquired, well, Brother Browder, how's the book doing? How's sales doing? And I would give him an update, and he said that, this book would be useful for the classroom, but most teachers don't have time to read and study this information. It would be helpful if you did a study guide. So I pulled together some friends of mine who were teachers, high school teachers, and we wrote the study guide over the course of the summer. So again, practical application of this information, making it accessible to people with the greatest need to know, who are primarily young folk. We need to get young folk introduced to this information as early as possible. And that was the impetus behind my working with my daughter to publish her books, so that young people can learn about Egypt through the eyes of one of their contemporaries. The book on the right is Egypt on the Potomac, a book that I wrote that book in 2005, but it's based on a research project that I created in 1986 after my second trip to Egypt, when I realized that the essence of Kemetic architecture, philosophy, symbolism, and spirituality was literally embedded in the landscape of Washington, D.C. So Egypt on the Potomac is a literary version of a 3-hour field trip that we do, where we take people around D.C. and show them physical structures that embody elements of Kemet. And the tagline for Egypt on the Potomac is decoding secrets hidden in plain sight. I'm a firm believer of the fact that Washington, D.C. is the city of secrets. And some of the biggest secrets in the capital, the wealthiest, most powerful nation in human history, have literally been hidden in plain sight. The so-called Washington Monument is one of the best examples of that. It is a symbol that represents the resurrection of Asar. Avatar, as I said, my background is in graphic design and advertising. So when I see movies, I watch movies from the position of an artist or a designer. I'm interested in the script. I'm interested in the direction. I'm interested in the art direction. All of the elements to go into creating a film. And I found Avatar to be a phenomenal film, but I also found that many people were missing the point. They were stuck on seeing the white person as coming into a community of indigenous people and saving them. But they didn't really see the other elements of the film that were there to be seen, but one had to have a culture, a consciousness in order to see that. So Avatar Revisited, a historical and cultural analysis, was written to reveal some of the hidden messages that James Cameron, in the writer and director of that film, intentionally embedded in this film to represent how Europeans have exploited people of color all around the world. That's the essence of that film. We mentioned Finding Karakhamun and Atlantis. Browder, I'm going to toss the ball to you so you can talk about your latest publication, Reflections of My First Trip to Africa.
Thank you, Dad. So Reflections of My First Trip to Africa is my third publication, and this is a revision of the very first book that I wrote, titled My First Trip to Africa. So the idea with this new publication was obviously to update the information. We also wanted to print it in color, but we wanted to add information about my work with the ASA Restoration Project. So I was really excited to publish that book, specifically because my first book, which I think is it's kind of set the standard, you know. I have people come up to me all the time, specifically adults who tell me, "Oh, you know, my parents got me your book to read. It was one of the first books that I've read on Africa." And even to be able to meet many people who, as a child, read my book and grew up to, enter a career field or do something that centers around educating our people about African and African American history. So that's my latest publication. So it focuses on my first trip to Africa, and I also expand on that narrative and talk about why I continue to travel to Africa over the last 30 something years. So I was fortunate this past December to make my 16th trip to Egypt. So I still have a lot more trips to go before I catch up to my dad, but I look forward to um, expanding on those experiences at some point. But my second publication, if you scroll down, you might see that just below. My second publication is called Africa on My Mind, Reflections of My Second Trip. So in 1993, I had the opportunity to go to West Africa and visit the countries of Ghana, Senegal, Gambia, and the Ivory Coast. And so after having gone to Egypt first and learning about our history before slavery, now it was important, especially being a little bit older, it was important to understand and learn more about the Ma'afa, what happened to our ancestors when they were brought from Africa to the Americas, and understanding how that still impacts us to this day. There's so many people within our community who say, you know, slavery happened so long ago and it's not important. But when you really begin to learn more about what happened to our ancestors, how they were mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually um, not only taken advantage of, but miseducated, we can begin to make those connections. And so it's a part of kind of the process is really about re-educating ourselves, understanding what happened to our ancestors. So one, we can ensure that it doesn't happen again, but how we can also heal from that karma as well. Because what most people don't understand is that the experiences of our ancestors have been passed on to us genetically. And so we all have experiences that we need to heal from, not only in this lifetime, but historically, ancestrally. So Africa on My Mind, Reflections of My Second Trip. That is my second book. So I've only published 3 books. Actually, so technically I do have a few other publications. When I began working with my dad and one of his colleagues, Deborah Watkins, who's based in California, they were they had rolled out the Cultural Imperative Initiative. And so when I came on board, we changed the name to the Cultural Imperative Program. I became the national director. of that program. But CIP is specifically for high school students of color. And the program is designed in such a way where we work with a group of high school students over the course of 5 months. And during those 5 months, students read select articles in from the Browder file. And so when I came on board, I used my knowledge and experience as an educator to create a curriculum. And so now we have a curriculum that facilitators can use to help teach this information. And so we've been fortunate to have over a dozen sites the last, what, 4 years now, throughout the entire United States. So we're looking forward to getting back into that. We had an off year. So hopefully by next year, we'll be back in full effect and ready to make CIP available to those who want to bring this program to their community.
Okay, that's good to know. So are you doing tours again in DC? I know with COVID, like, are there restrictions? Is that happening?
What we did last year was modify our Egypt on the Potomac field trip.
Mm-hmm.
And we do a walking field trip now, focusing primarily on 16th Street, which is the Corridor of Light, where there are three major structures that are an integral part of our overall field trip. And so we walk the field trip, which means that we don't have to worry about buses. We can take a smaller group of people. It's a more intimate setting. And then we have a facility we go to afterwards where we do a debriefing, and then we share the rest of the content in the form of a PowerPoint where they get to see everything that they would have seen on the regular 3-hour bus field trip of the city. So those field trips, because of the fact that they take place outside, they take place between April and November. So our 2022 season will begin the first Saturday of April, and typically they run the first Saturday of the month between April and November, and they'll be gearing back up soon in a couple of months. And again, you can go to the IKG website where you'll find all the details about the field trip and how to sign up, purchase your tickets, and come and experience Egypt on the Potomac.
Awesome. That's going to be my next trip. So how is it that we can support all of this? We can support the ASA restoration project. Let me ask you a better question. How can we support these efforts that you're doing, that Atlantis is doing the best? How can we support?
Well, I'll say this. Because of the fact that our ancestors who were enslaved in America were subjected to some of the most horrendous acts of any human beings on the planet, it was illegal for Africans to learn how to read or write. And as a consequence, Atlantis alluded a little while ago to epigenetics, genetic memories being passed down from generation to generation. And epigenetics explains on one level why so many of our people have an aversion to reading. Or if you give a Black person a book, first thing they'll do is to see how many pages are in the book, see how many pictures, illustrations in the book. So we've been programmed to have an aversion to reading. But the essence of life can be found in books. The essence of life is associated with reading. So every person of African ancestry, no matter where you are in the world, should have a library. And that library should consist of books written by and about people of African descent. We learn everybody else's history and culture. We worship everybody else's gods and everybody's value systems. We need to now learn our own. We need to immerse our children in knowing who they are so they can be comfortable being themselves. So it begins first with having a library, spending time regularly reading with your children, having important discussions about what you've read. Our books were written to facilitate that reality. With regards to supporting the ASA Restoration Project, as I mentioned previously, we are a 501c3. So every contribution that you make to the ASA Restoration Project, you write that off your taxes. So it costs you nothing. We have Cash App. You can go through PayPal. You can go through Amazon Smile. And let me share this. Everybody and their mama uses Amazon, right? Amazon is ubiquitous. So there's another feature in Amazon called Amazon Smile. IKG Cultural Circles, which is the parent company for the Asa Restoration Project, is registered with Amazon Smile. So if you make your purchase on Amazon Smile as opposed to Amazon and go in and register under IKG Cultural Circles, then 1% of everything you buy on Amazon comes to the Asa Restoration Project. PayPal also has a giving fund where you can make contributions to the Asa Restoration Project directly through PayPal. So those are some of the some of the easiest ways to support the Asa Restoration Project, and you'll get a tax letter from us that you can use with submitting your taxes so that you can write off this contribution. So it's a win-win situation. For those who are old school, don't like making online payments, you can write a check on our website. The information is there for whom you should make the check out to, where to mail the check. We do Cash App. So we've done everything we could to make it as easy as possible for people to support the work of the Asa Restoration Project, and so that's it.
Brother Tony, what's your Cash App?
Cash App is $ IKGCC.
Y'all, that's easy. Come on, hit up Cash App. That's easy. We need to support Brother Tony. Another easy way that you can do is to have an auto deduction every month.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy to do. We have subscriptions to stuff we don't even use anymore. Sometimes you sign up for something, you don't even know what it is. I signed up for 2 things, didn't know what it was. I had to get that money back. So like, look at the, I put the website, I tagged the website, and there's a donate button that is that screen that I showed you, and it's the one that that he was just talking about with the Amazon Smile. So if you go to ikgculturalresourcecenter.com, which is tagged, you will see the donate button. And remember, it's a tax write-off. Remember, you can do a monthly deduction, and eventually you'll forget about it. It's something, if you have an amount that works within your budget.
Mm-hmm.
We crowdfund to do a lot of things that don't elevate our people, that don't educate our people, that don't bring us closer to Black liberation, quite frankly. Sometimes it takes us in the opposite direction from Black liberation. This clearly is something that is going to help free our minds and everything else that we need to move forward in the next, going forward as Pan-African Black people. Mm-hmm. So really seriously consider making this a part of your budget.
Mm-hmm. Because if I can add to that, my sister, for anyone who makes a contribution through Cash App, if you can give us an email address for you, because unfortunately Cash App doesn't allow us to capture additional information so that we can send you your tax deductible contribution details. So if you're using Cash App, please give us an email address so that we can make certain that you receive your documentation to write your contribution off for your taxes.
Now, which email should they email it to?
Let's see. Well, there's an email address. I forget the email address is associated with the IKG website, but an easy email address, you can put this in the chat, is browderfile@yahoo.com. browderfile@yahoo.com.
Okay, so I'm putting this here and I'm tagging it. So guys, so there you have it. The Cash App is IKGCC. And then once you make your contribution, email browderfile@yahoo.com so that you can get your tax write-off information.
And actually, just to make it easier, they can there's a space in Cash App where they can leave a note, so they can just put their email address in there as well.
You know what? We about to do that. You see what the youth bring, y'all. You see what the youth bring. Okay, hold on. IKGCC. Put your email in the message line. we go. Boom. I'm going to tag that. That makes it easier. Right. Because it's right there. So when you use Cash App, it's whatever it's for, just put your email there and then you'll get your information. Okay. So thank you guys so much for coming on the show tonight. It was so much fun. We learned so much. The chat was flying. There was no way I could get to your questions, guys. So if I missed your questions, I'm sorry. Usually I have a chance to sit back and answer some of the questions and read them, but I didn't even get a chance to do that. So just wanted to thank both of you for coming on the show. Atlantis, it was such a pleasure meeting you for the first time here on the show. And if you guys have any questions that you want to ask Brother Tony, you know how to reach out to him and how to get him. You can always ask me. I can forward it over. And you can see this broadcast again when it is scheduled to rebroadcast, which I'm going to be honest with you, I don't even know. Sometimes I'm minding my business. I'm like, oh, our Tuesday Talk just posted. So you'll be able to see it again on the Shrine of Ma'at page, Shrine of Ma'at YouTube, and Kemetic Legacy, because I know some of y'all going to ask me. So that's the answer before you ask.
So before we go, let's make a plug for next month. We're going to be participating in the One Africa conference that the Happy Crew based in New York are sponsoring in Aswan, Egypt. Brother Jabari is going to be the moderator of that event. It's going to be a phenomenal gathering of scholars. It's kind of like the third Nile Valley Conference. It's going to be a wonderful event. Atlantis will be leading her first study tour to Egypt without the benefit of her dad on the 18th. And you know, some heavy hitters from New York will be there. Lynn and Rosalind Jeffries and Brother Small is going to be there. We've got Obinga coming as well, and Joyce King. It's going to be a phenomenal gathering. And if I'm not mistaken, Brother Taki is working on us being able to live stream that event as well. So keep your eyes open for the One Africa Conference. And one last thing, Atlantis and I are going to be in Pompano Beach, Florida on Saturday, the 5th of February. So this would be my first public presentation since 2001 to 2000. Since 2000, this COVID thing's been going on for what, 2 years now? Going on 3 years. Yeah, so since 2000. So I invite you all to check us out. It's going to be part of the Hidden History of Africa Part 2 series. You can purchase your tickets at Eventbrite. Check us out. Come see Atlantis and I live in Pompano Beach, Florida on the 5th of February.
Awesome. Thank you for those two announcements. Atlantis, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, first, I want to thank you for inviting us to share the stage with you tonight. And I want to acknowledge all of those who tuned in. I see we're getting lots of love in the chat. And shout out to KK. I'll see you in Florida, and Sister Damara, and a few folks who acknowledge that they've been contributing to Amazon Smile, to the project through Amazon Smile, and have been donating through PayPal for years. So I want to acknowledge those people who have been supporting us. Thank you. And just know that we couldn't do this work without your support. So thank you, and thank everyone for all the love. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. So thank you all for joining us. And thank you both for being our guests this evening. And I will see you all next Tuesday. Shemem Atep, go forth in peace.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.